The reason we're going first is just that it was thought that
Bill, why don't you come up here?
I'll see you.
Come up here.
is that we were going to sort of give each region different topics to cover, but there are so many topics that it was thought that Toronto would do theirs, and anyway. Even explanation. Okay. Toronto had a very large group this afternoon, and a very large and wide-ranging discussion on a number of topics. So we sort of grouped the issues, and this is a very surface. We have a lot of flip chart notes of issues and actions that are recorded, which will go to the OCASI board. So all of your comments that will be used and processed if you don't hear them today. But some of the highlights are, there was a lot of discussion items that related to what we could call member issues. And in the Toronto area, we looked at, there was a lot of discussion around new service planning and service coordination models and approaches, and some that are going on in Toronto, and others that there was interest in, and the role of OCASI in supporting service coordination and sharing information in the Toronto region. There was a long discussion around conflicts between members of OCASI members in Toronto, and the role of OCASI and funders in dealing with conflicts between organizations. There was encouragement of the OCASI professionalization project that's going on, as something that's important in that same context of member services. There was a request for more communication and perhaps some new technology tools that we talked about to allow Toronto members to communicate effectively, and communication to frontline staff and to new satellite locations. And that's all part of some of the changes going on in Toronto, that organizations often have mobile staff in multiple locations, and have OCASI recognize the communications to people in new ways. There was also a bit of discussion around the whole Toronto region reorganization, since Toronto is very large for a single region, and talk about perhaps different ways that we could divide Toronto to have more meaningful meetings in between the conferences. The second big area where some concerns that were Toronto specific, there's been a lot of change going on in the city of Toronto, demographic change, and new recognition by a variety of planning bodies and organizations and funders around changes between the downtown and the suburbs of the city of Toronto, the creation of service hubs in priority neighborhoods, and the creation of priority neighborhoods and so forth. And the budget crisis of the City of Toronto, and the whole issue of a fair deal for cities and so forth that are Toronto-focused issues. And we talked about a suggestion of having a funder table with United Way, the City of Toronto, and some of the CIC and MCI to talk about especially priority neighborhoods and these hubs and so forth, so getting all the funders together to talk about that. There were some issues, there was some feedback for MCI and Citizenship and Immigration Canada. It's definitely an ongoing concern around advance payments for CIC. Some concern with MCI around the future of ESL services, and definitely some ongoing concern about misuse of ESL funds by Toronto School Board and the issue of ESL funds in Toronto, possibly elsewhere in the province. Some discussion around the growth of staff at both CIC and MCI, and the training and orientation of new staff, and how OCASI could play a role in that. And CIC plans for youth services, and a recognition of youth issues in Toronto. I'm sure it's true everywhere in the province, but particularly in Toronto around some of the youth issues. There was discussion about advocacy issues that OCASI, and in Toronto there's a group called the Toronto Immigrant and Refugee Action Committee, or Action Council, and encouragement for OCASI members to join, but issues for both to look at, including the ongoing non-status campaign, the emerging issue of delays in inland trains, deportations, which of course has been is still a significant issue in the City of Toronto, the new emerging issue of guest workers in the province and in Toronto, and the broader concerns around the country's failure to reach our immigration targets and immigration policy, and re-examining IRPA and looking at the point system and what role OCASI can play in that as an advocacy role. And then finally, there were a few issues that we didn't have time for a lot of development of discussion. The role of Francophone agencies within OCASI and in the Toronto region, and our new Toronto regional rep is from a Francophone organization, so how that's one of the steps towards that. And then more broadly, service issues for youth, which we know is being recognized, but also service issues for seniors, particularly the large number of sponsored senior citizens and family reunification. So those were some of the issues that came up in our very busy meeting. Are we taking questions or wait to the end? Did any people feel like captured the discussion?
Yeah, I think the funding table thing wasn't to convene around the hubs. The idea was to get funders that we should give them a plan about how they could fund in a more coordinated way.
That's right, coordination of funding, yeah.
I was going to suggest that there already is a Toronto funders table, and so it's to have them pay attention to our sector in a more meaningful way, because I think they themselves are looking for a new direction.
Also, we weren't sure though if CIC is at that table.
CIC is at the table. They tend not to show up to meetings. And it's unfortunate. I know Lisa is looking at me and thinking, what are you talking about? But neither Anna, Darlene, or Wilma is here. But you guys are represented at the table, you just don't show up. But neither does MCI, so there you go. United Way, the City of Toronto, and our various foundations tend to be the ones who show up. And OCASI gets invited from time to time to yell at you.
Next